Today we're showing our Simplicity Regent some love. My goal is for today to get this thing washed up nice and clean, take the deck off, clean up the underside of the deck, and apply some protective non-stick coating to the bottom of that for testing out next year. Normally, I don't like to use water to clean my Simplicity Regent and just lawn equipment in general because the electronics on this equipment are far from marine grade and do not like to get wet. So normally I use a leaf blower and blow off the dust and debris. However, over time there is dust and debris that sticks, especially in fall, that doesn't come off with air alone. So once a year I like to do a deep clean on my lawn equipment with water. Normally I do that outside, but it's Christmas week and we're in a deep freeze. So doing this outside is not really an option. Normally in late November, late fall, after the last leaf pickup is done, I'm able to clean the machine up outside with water. This year though, we had an early freeze up and snow cover, so that really wasn't an option. And I was trying to get in as much Gulf as possible before this. But I heat my garage and I put in this hose reel this year, so it actually makes cleaning up the lawn tractor in the garage quite easy. So this is my first year doing this. Let's see how it goes. This is my second winter of owning this. What I did not do last year is clean up all the different components. So my plan for this year is the bagger hood here. Give this thing a nice clean. Even this screen gets a buildup of grass on it, and I think it restricts the airflow. You can still see my hand decent there, but we're gonna clean up all this stuff. We'll send some water through the inside of the pickup tubes and the takeoff there, just make sure everything's clean as it can be for next year. Normally, you don't want to hose down your engine like this. To me, it's a balance of how clean do you want to keep it. And obviously, you don't want to get oil in the crankcase or in the intake system. I'm going to change out the air filter after doing this in case it gets a little wet. Also, I've not replaced it yet, so we're going to do that today. But to me, it's your own choice. Engines and water in general are not a great mix, but I like to keep things clean, so it's a balance. You can choose whatever you want to do. This also helps you keep track of if you've got any oil leaks or whatever. It looks like on this one valve cover, I might have an oil leak on the corner of this valve cover. It's a little greasy. So if I clean things up nice and it reappears, that way I know I've got a problem here, and I'll change out the valve cover gasket here. Let's get this chute off. See how dirty it is. Leaves stuck on debris in there. Let's get that cleaned up. I should probably try scraping some of this out before getting it wet and making a big mess. All right, that's pretty clean. Now we'll hit this thing with water and get it real clean. Nice thing about the hose reel in the garage here is, well, I'm comfortable, but I also have hot water hooked up to this, and it actually seems to make a little bit of a difference when trying to remove this stuck on grass. water does seem to melt it away a little bit better. Of course, I could use a pressure washer that would peel this stuff off very good. However, I'm trying to minimize the bounce back spray in the garage here to keep things clean, like the walls and that. So that would be an option outside. That would clean this right up. But anyway, we're going to do it with hot water inside. Well, that water worked excellent on our hood here. That screen, there's some leaves stuck in it yet. But that screen really, we were able to knock off all that caked on grass and that. So we should be back to pretty close to like new airflow through that. If you let that build up over time, your bagging performance is going to decrease significantly. So that's something to watch out for. One negative to doing this in the garage is the floor drain does not like all the leaves and the grass. So let's pop this thing off, see if we can clean it out. The idea of this thing, there's a low spot in the middle with some screen type material. So you're not letting rocks and stuff like that from road debris get down to floor drain. It makes sense. It's just kind of a maintenance pain in the butt. However, doing this makes me really appreciate the warm water I'm using. If anything, it's a little hot and humid in here. Feels like we're in the rainforest. There we go, now it's draining good. I'm gonna try to rinse these bags off. I don't know how that's gonna go. I'm sure they're not gonna get super white again. But that's one thing that really starts looking old over time is these collection bags. I wish they were just black. And even then, I think I mentioned this during my initial review, that the two bags don't quite match. One's more of an off-white and one's more of a white. Anyway, most people might not care, but it kind of bugs me. Let's see what happens when we try to rinse those off. Maybe if I use some like carpet cleaner or something like that, I bet that would help, but we'll leave that for another day. All right, we've got our machine nice and clean. We have our bagging components nice and clean. Next step is to take the deck off and get that cleaned up, which is the biggest amount of work. The deck comes off pretty easily on our Simplicity Regent here. The first thing we want to remember to do is disconnect this wire here that powers the height of cut motor on the bottom here. So there's just a nice connection there. You push in this toggles and it pulls off. If you forget to do that and rip the deck off, you will rip that connector out and you'll have to fix it. The next thing we can do is pop down the front of the deck. That's pretty easy to do on our Simplicity. We just go to the front and there's this spring-loaded latch. We just pull out with our hand while we grab the front. Then it's hooked on pins, so we can just lift it up, pull it forward, and then drop it down. We can see that just latches up here, so once you pull the release, you just have to lift it off and down over that. The next thing, it exposes our drive belt here, so we'll just pop this off. Engine pulley. Then we can remove our lift cables from the back of the mower deck, and we'll put it down into free float mode to do this, to take tension off of them. If we go into the back of the mower, we can see the tension cable attaches to the mower deck with this cotter pin here. So we'll just pull that off, grab the washer, pop that cable out. Do the same thing on the non-discharge side. That's hidden in behind this bracket a little bit, what we can see in there. Same exact setup. Remove the pin and our washer. Drop it, so we have to get it later. Once all that's done, we can come to the discharge side, kind of rotate the deck out. There you go, the deck's off. On my washer, I'm gonna put this back. So now that the deck's off, I'm gonna do one more rinse on the underbody of our tractor, make sure that's all nice and clean. We'll move this out of the way and then we can focus on the mower deck. Because we just got done washing our Simplicity and the electronics are still wet, I don't want to power up the ignition until everything has had a chance to dry nicely. So I'm going to move this by hand, get it out of the way so we can work on the deck. To do that, all you have to do is come to the back of the mower and find this rod, pull it out, and that will disengage the hydro transmission so we can roll it around by hand. Makes things a lot easier than trying to pull against the transmission and won't damage it. So, all right, we've got everything reasonably cleaned up here except the underside of the deck. Let's flip this thing over and see what we're working with. Hey, not too bad at all. It's actually not as bad as I was expecting. I have not done anything with this since leaf pickup. There are a few massive buildups here that we'll scrape off before we start going. But you can see, it's interesting, the high velocity areas, this area here at the discharge chute, around the blade tip is where things stay nice and clean. It's low velocity areas at the center of this small blade and at the top of the deck is where things tend to build up. Makes sense, that's pretty much same. You're not getting as much flow to keep things clean. Here's where I'm going to store the lawnmower for the winter. And since I have the deck off, I can kind of slide the material collection chute underneath along with the bags and kind of prop the back up on there so it takes up the least amount of space possible. Not bad. I'm going to stage the deck right over in this area on sawhorses so I can work on it. All right, we've got the deck up on sawhorses and we'll let this thing dry out, then we'll clean it up better with an abrasive and try out some different coatings. The one repair I've had to make to the deck here on this support over the discharge, I had to rivet this back in place as the spot weld failed. Still holding up fine, so I don't need to do anything there. The rest of it looks structurally sound, so it's just a matter of trying something here to make it stay cleaner. So we've got a couple options there. Mow when it's only dry. Unfortunately, with working and weather, that's almost impossible. But the other option is to use some sort of coating that makes it less sticky. So we'll see what we've got there. Just to wrap up our cleaning, I'm going to look in the intake, see if any water got in there, dry it out, and replace the air filter so that on next startup we're not sucking up any water into the engine. And a little bit on the underside of this cover. And there's some evidence of water getting on the air filter here in this air filter. And some water did make it into the intake there by the air filter, so I'm going to dry that up. And that's part of the reason I don't like to wash this thing with water too much. Water gets in places it should not be, and if the engine sucked that up, that is bad for lubrication, but also if you get too much, you can actually hydrolock the cylinders and bend the rods or put a hole in the piston. So that I'm not very good at this, replacing air filters, because they're kind of a pain to find and to get. You could go to the Simplicity dealer. They are few and far between. This is a standard Briggs & Stratton engine, so my friends over at Hipa actually sent me a 2-pack, and this is awesome. We're gonna open this up, take a look, and see if there's any difference we can spot between our OEM filter. But this is something we should probably all do more often, replace our air filters. I'm normally fairly cheap and I just blow them off with the air compressor, which you can do better than not servicing at all. But anyway, this thing, obviously there's a difference on green there. It comes with the pre-filter and the paper filter. The one difference I do see is inside in that paper filter. If we look at the number of pleats, it's more on the OEM filter. So that means there's more surface area. But actually the pleats and the support on it, on this aftermarket filter, seem much better. It's a little sturdier. These pleats on the OEM filter are not straight, you know, they've bent over time. Things like that, and they're discolored because it's used. Anyway, this place has an Amazon store, so with the reduced number of pleats, it might not last as long. That's the only downfall. It's got less surface area of media. It could fill up a little bit faster than the original, but if you replace it, no big deal. So this seems like a nice unit. Looks good. We're gonna throw this thing in and not get any water in our engine. So this is kind of an interesting air filter. There's nothing to hold it in place besides the compression of the filter. Kind of push it down and then lock it into place. This Hipa unit fit perfectly, nice snug in place. Nice new air filter, good peace of mind. So we start off spring on a good note. The other thing I'm going to do is look at the oil. I don't put that many hours on. So I never change the oil on hours. But it's always good to look at it. You can tell a lot from how it looks on the dipstick. This is still a nice honey color. Also, how it lays on the dipstick, you can see it's a nice even film of oil on that dipstick. If it gets streaky at all, it means it's losing its viscosity, surface tension properties. And it's not going to coat the metal properly and lubricate things. This still is in great shape. I'll probably still change it in spring, just because over time it does tend to absorb some moisture. But I've got it in a heated garage, so that's not as big of a concern. I don't have big temperature differential. So anyway, some good Simplicity is nice and clean. It can sleep well over winter now. If you found some value in this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, hitting the like button on the video. We'll be back in the next video to tackle the coating on our mower deck. For now, we got everything cleaned up. Our mower's in good shape to sit over winter and be ready to go in spring. Thanks for watching. Adios.